Hello. As part of the series brought to you by the NBEA, I'm going to talk to you today about eventing in New Brunswick and how to navigate eventing competitions. Who am I? My name is Samantha Atkinson. I operate Atkinson Equestrian as a freelance competition coach and trainer out of Fredericton, New Brunswick. I am the Vice President of Horse Trials New Brunswick, the Event Director for Fauché International. I have passed my rider level 8. I compete in eventing primarily, but also show jumping and dressage. I've competed through the preliminary level. I would like to compete in FEI at some point. My horse that I show is Alana Palmer's Thoroughbred Royal Runner. I also ride Deanna Phelan's horse, Miss Jane, and I would like to continue to work on my competition coach certification in the future. So what is eventing? So eventing is kind of considered a triathlon of equestrian sports. So the sport was originally designed as a test for cavalry officers. There are 3 phases in eventing. The first phase is the dressage test. So the dressage test is basically a predetermined series of movements designed to demonstrate accuracy for the horse and rider. The second phase is the cross-country course, which is a series of obstacles that you compete in an open field. It could include water or drops or banks and various items. And the third phase is show jumping, which is a final test of accuracy. The scores from all 3 days or phases are combined to decide the overall standing. And the sport has 5 levels of recognized competition. How can I participate in New Brunswick? Well, eventing in New Brunswick is coordinated through Horse Trials New Brunswick. A calendar of events is kept through the NBEA, which is the New Brunswick Equestrian Association, and Horse Trials New Brunswick websites. It's not currently up to date as we're just beginning a new year, but you can check back there and all the events will be listed. There's also something called an omnibus, which is kind of a weird word, which is associated specifically with eventing. And basically, if you're going to have a horse trial, which is what an event is also called, the organizer will submit all the information pertaining to that horse trial to Equestrian Canada, and then an omnibus is created. And the omnibus used to be a book, a hard copy book that listed all the events that were in your province, actually all the provinces in Canada, and it says what levels are offered and various things about those events. So it's kind of like a prize list in show jumping, but they're all offered ahead of time. Now, for some local competitions, such as derbies or combined tests, you will not find them in the omnibus, so you would have to check directly with those horse show organizers to find their prize lists. When you find the horse trial, let's talk about horse trials that you would like to enter. Maybe it's Strathgartney horse trial or potentially Matt Straight's Peekaboo Corner horse trial that we'll hopefully be offering. You would find their omnibus page, you would check out the information listed there, and then you would fill out an entry form, and the entry forms are standardized through equestrian.ca with all that information. So we welcome new participants into the sport in New Brunswick and offer lots of levels to accommodate beginners through advanced riders. You need to have a few memberships if you want to compete in a sanctioned competition. You need to have an NBEA membership, so the New Brunswick Equestrian Association, Horse Trials New Brunswick membership, and a sport license. So you can find those memberships on each of those websites, which I will share a little bit later on. The Horse Trials New Brunswick membership is very inexpensive. It's $20 for a senior. So we do realize that memberships can get a little pricey, but we're working to kind of streamline that. So your horse will also need to be vaccinated and have a current Coggins. I think given the pandemic, everyone can understand the importance of vaccines and safe biosecurity measures. So we do require those to make sure everyone is safe and healthy. Non-sanctioned competitions are also available for those trying out the sport for the first time or who are looking for maybe a lower level of competition, and the requirements to compete there might differ, so you might not need all of the things listed above. Do you need a coach? Well, my answer would be yes, but I'll go into the reasons here as to why. So we highly recommend that you find an appropriate coach to help you learn the ropes of eventing before you compete. Eventing is considered a high-risk sport, as we can all understand, and having a certified instructor or coach can help you save you and your horse from serious injury. That's what we're looking to prevent and keep you happy and safe. And it'll actually help your performance as well if you pick the right coach. So some coaches with eventing experience in New Brunswick. And there are more, but these are the coaches that I have used previously and that are available, and all of them have been certified on cross-country courses. So we have Rob Stevenson. He's a high-performance coach. So you would go to Rob if you're competing at probably the pre-training level or above and have some pretty big goals in equestrian sport. Jen Hansen. Jen is a competition coach. She operates out of the Hampton Riding Center in Hampton, and has students from basically all levels, and has a kind of a beginner cross-country course on her property as well. Lori Leach is a competition coach in Harvey. She operates out of Bray Farren Equestrian Center, and she has jumps on her property all the way up through training level. Then there's me, Samantha Atkinson. I'm a competition coach as well, and I freelance out of the Fredericton area, but I do travel somewhat. There's Zoe Erickson-Meesters. Zoe is also a competition coach and has competed up through, I think, the preliminary level. And she's great. She operates a facility in Fredericton and has some cross-country jumps on her property as well. Then we have Reba Stewart, instructor, hopefully soon to be competition coach. There's a little nudge for Reba in Blacks Harbor, and Reba has her own facility there with her husband, Stefan. And finally, we have Suzanne Stevenson, who is Rob Stevenson's wife. Suzanne is currently an instructor, hopefully to be a competition coach in the future as well, and she operates out of the same facility as Rob in Hampton. So if you don't see a coach there that would work for you for whatever reason, there's a list of all the coaches in New Brunswick at their registry or the link below, and you could find someone else if you're more comfortable with, but these are all the coaches that have specific eventing experience. Okay, so we'll go into what is a horse trial. So a horse trial is the main competition in eventing. It can also be called an event, or sometimes they call it a 3-day event, but that takes place over 3 days. Those are just nuances, but you can always call it a horse trial. So the horse trial consists of 3 distinct tests, usually taking place on 1, 2, or 3 days. So sometimes all 3 tests are on one day. Sometimes you have the dressage on one day and the cross-country and show jumping on the next, or sometimes it's split out over 3 days. So you ride your dressage test, show jumping, and then cross-country course. So the dressage test must be ridden first, so you show up and ride your dressage test immediately, and then the cross-country and jumping test can follow in either order. So it depends on what the organizers decide. What are the levels? I like all these pictures. The official levels for eventing in Canada are entry, pre-training, training level, preliminary, intermediate, and advanced. So those are the ones that are offered at sanctioned competitions and unsanctioned competitions as well, but that are recognized by Equestrian Canada. In New Brunswick, we also offer a pre-entry level, as well as entry, pre-training, and training levels of competition. We did have an FEI event, I'll get into that in a little bit, in New Brunswick, but since the pandemic, we have put that on pause. There are also local divisions, so any division below the entry level, they are offered at some locations and can include a starter or even a tadpole level below pre-entry. So you can offer those types of levels at your horse show, but they're not considered recognized levels. The FEI, the Fédération Équestre Internationale, also offers international levels of competition. So you can think of these as kind of like championships at each level. So you need to have qualifying scores to compete, and they're definitely a harder test. So we used to offer one of those, Fauché International, in Jemseg, New Brunswick, and it was amazing. It was one of only 2 international events in Canada, but since the pandemic, we've kind of put that on hold for now. So the FEI star levels start at 1 star, which is a training level test, 2 star, preliminary, 3 star, intermediate, 4 star, advanced, and also 5 star, which is advanced, but it's even more advanced, and there's only 6 venues that actually offer this level in the entire world. Continuing on with the levels. So we'll start with the local divisions. These divisions they've got various names depending on where you are. Like I said, they're not standardized. It's anywhere below 0.8 meters, and they are sometimes called tadpole, starter, or pre-entry. So these divisions, as you can imagine, are for riders who are new to the sport or young children. The courses are very welcoming, inviting, and they want to be designed to introduce new riders to the sport of eventing in a safe way. Local divisions, as I said, were not standardized through Equine Canada, but can be offered at sanctioned competitions. So you just need to check out the prize list for the show that you want to enter and see if they offer the local division that you're interested in. These divisions could be as simple as a short course through flag markers, so without even any jumping efforts at all, just to get people used to galloping through a field. They could also be logs on the ground, and when you get to the pre-entry level, there are some small solid obstacles that replicate kind of the larger obstacles seen at the higher levels. The courses are a lot shorter, less strenuous, but we say that all riders should be comfortable riding in an open field and jumping small courses and obstacles before they attempt any type of eventing competition. We move on to entry level. So there's kind of a big jump between the local divisions to entry level. Entry level is a substantial ask for a horse and rider, even though it's called entry level. So this is at 0.85 meters. It's designed, this is from Equine Canada, these definitions, or Equestrian Canada. It's designed to introduce green horses and riders to horse trials. It is designed for competitors and horses that have already had experience at schooling shows in all 3 disciplines. So you should already be pretty familiar with eventing before you just go and try entry level. It should be safe and inviting, build confidence. The cross-country course at this point can include a variety of obstacles, including a bank, a ditch, a brush, and maybe even a water crossing. You must have at least 2 strides between numbered obstacles. So as you can see, the level of difficulty is already increasing. So if you want to go entry level, you should make sure that you can do a bank, a ditch, and go through water before you get to the show. Pre-training. So pre-training level is at 0.91 meters. It's a continuation of the introduction to horse trials. This level is designed for competitors who have already had experience at lower levels, or for experienced riders who are with horses who are new to the sport. So cross-country obstacles are more substantial but remain simple and fairly straightforward. They'll have clear ground lines, so they're inviting for the horses, and they can start to include a drop, a combination, and a jump out of the water. Again, this is getting more difficult. Also, I should mention, as the levels get higher, I didn't put it in this presentation, but I probably should have, the speed that you're required to complete the course in increases. So you go faster as you get higher in the levels. So the speed that you would go at, you can be penalized for going too fast. So the speed you would go at tadpole should not be the same as you would go at pre-training. And you can find all those speeds in the rule book for eventing. Training level. So this is currently the highest level that we offer for competition in New Brunswick. At training level, things are getting pretty challenging. We don't have a ton of training level riders in New Brunswick, but we're actually building our repertoire of training level riders. So it just kind of shows that our sport programs are working in the province. Training level is at 1 meter, so about 3'3". The training division, like I said, is the highest level that's offered. The dressage tests before this point were pretty straightforward, not a lot of things asked, but now lateral work is introduced, lengthening, so some longitudinal work, and smaller circles. Cross country at this point is a lot faster. You could have 3 elements involved in combinations. You could have banks, drops, stitches, jumps into water, out of water, skinnies, so lots going on. How is it scored? So it took me a while to catch on to how eventing is scored, because there's a lot going on. It's not just the dressage or the cross country or the stadium jumping, it's all three of them together. So the winner at an event is the horse and rider pair who have the lowest score at the end of all three phases. So we're looking for the lowest amount of what we call penalty points. Your original score is determined in the dressage phase. Again, the lower the score, the better in this phase. Disobediences, so that would be runouts or stops at jumps. Rails and time vaults are then added to the score from the cross-country and show jumping phases. The goal is to accumulate 0 additional penalty points during the jumping phases and finish the event on your dressage score. We call this an FOD, finish on dressage, and that's kind of the goal that we're always looking for. If a rider falls off at any point while being judged, so that's excluding the warm-up ring, they're eliminated from the competition, so they don't get to progress, even if you fall off in dressage. So on the right is an example of I put a good dressage test that I had completed, and you can see that each movement is judged out of 10. You get a final score at the end of all the movements together, and that is converted to penalty points, which we will talk about. Dressage. So the object of dressage, right from the rule book, is harmonious development of the physique and ability of the horse and rider as a pair, demonstrating a series of predetermined movements to a judge. So basically you memorize a dressage test, which includes different elements, and then you have to demonstrate that to the judge and they give you a score. You have 90 seconds after the whistle to enter the dressage ring and start your test. You cannot use any voice during the test. You can't tell your horse he's a good boy, nothing like that, or you will get a penalty of a deduction of 2 points. Certain equipment is required, but you'll have to check out the eventing rule book for that. A caller, so somebody who stands outside the ring and actually dictates your test, is permitted until the intermediate level. But we try to suggest that people memorize their test. It's a good test for you too. Marks from 0 to 10 are awarded by each judge for each movement of the dressage test, and then you get some collective marks at the end. And then if you go off course, you will get 2 penalty points for your first error. So if you make a circle at the wrong place, they'll ring a little bell, tell you you went off course, and allow you to perform the movement again, but you will get 2 penalties for that. If you go off course again, which I've done before, you'll get 4 penalties for the second. And if you go off course 3 times, you are eliminated from the entire show. So we don't want to do that. At the end of your dressage test, you get a percentage score based on 100%. So that would look like a regular, if you go to a regular dressage competition, they give you a percentage. A good score, what was my score? I think it was a 70. Anyway, a good score, I mean, they're all pretty good scores, but just say we got a 70%. That's pretty good. So the confusing part, the percentage mark, my 70%, is then deducted from 100 to produce the amount of penalty points that we scored. So if I scored a 70% dressage test, which is good, then we deduct that from 100, and my number of penalty points that is the number that I would use for the rest of the competition for my score would be 30. So we're trying to get as low as possible. So 30 is pretty low. We do not want to add any more penalties to that score. Cross country. Cross country is probably the most exciting and challenging test for most riders. I think most people who get into eventing get it in it for the cross country. It's pretty fun. So this test focuses on the ability of the athletes and horses to adapt to different terrains, demonstrate bravery, knowledge of pace, which I talked about. You have to know how fast you're meant to go to complete the course. And yeah, it's normally carried out at the canter or a gallop. The jumps in this phase, back in the past did not fall down, but we have introduced some jumps that have what's called frangible technology. So if you hit the top rail of the jump with a certain amount of force, it will actually fall down, which was introduced to help keep the sport more safe. Okay, so you start the test in a start box. That photo on the left shows Abby Alexander. I think we were at Wesley Clover there, and the start box, you can see it on the left as well, that white fence. So it starts in the start box, you're counted down, they'll say 10, 9, 8, and then they'll tell you to go, and off you go. So an optimum time has been set for each course, different one for each course, and shared with the riders in advance. So your goal is not to exceed the optimum time, so not to go over that time, or to go too fast, because excessive speed is also penalized. Some riders at upper levels will wear a watch, and it will kind of beep at certain points through the course to tell you at your markers how fast you're going. That gets into a whole lot more detail, and we don't really encourage that until you're, I don't know, competing at an FEI level probably. Some riders do it, but it's totally up to you. I would suggest you learn how to jump all the jumps and get around safely first. So the riders must pass through a finish line to complete this phase. And I've seen it happen before that riders totally miss the finish line and their time keeps ticking and they're actually eliminated. So don't do that. The jumps are also flagged with red flags on the right, white flags on the left. So you always want to jump the jump with the red flag on the right. Penalties in this phase. So your first refusal, run out, or circle before the jump. And that's another complicated rule that involves crossing your path, but I would suggest you read the rule book to brush up on that rule. The first disobedience is 20 penalties. So if my score was 30 and I had one disobedience cross country, then I would have a 50 penalties. My second refusal would be an additional 40 penalties, and my third refusal is elimination. So now that we have these things I talked about earlier, these frangible devices, so the rails that fall down, if you activate one of those by hitting the jump, you receive 11 penalties. So at training level, like we offer in New Brunswick or below, elimination is required after the third disobedience at the same obstacle on course, or the fourth disobedience on the entire course. Okay? Show jumping. So if you've ever, I always suggest that people do a show jumping competition before they go to an eventing competition, just so you're competing in a ring that is closed in and kind of the antes are a little lower. So show jumping. This test is similar to an ordinary show jumping competition. So its main objective is to prove the horses and competitors are well trained in the specialist discipline of show jumping, and that after they go cross country and do dressage and all that, they can still be careful and accurate. So the nature of the course, how long it is, and the speed, and the obstacles, or the degree of difficulty of the obstacles depends on what level you're at. A bell or whistle is used to start the test. If a rider crosses the start line before the bell or whistle, they will be eliminated. And I have seen that happen. So if you don't hear the bell or whistle, you're better off to look at the judge and signal to her that you hadn't heard it, and maybe they'll ring it again or blow the whistle again for you. Riders do not have to salute the judge during this phase. You used to have to, but they've kind of taken that rule out. But you can do so if you please, as a clear signal that you're ready to begin your round. That's kind of how I approach things, just so there's no confusion. At the FEI level, a salute is required, so it's good practice to salute at the national levels, just in case you get up to FEI and you're ready to go. Faults at this phase. Knocking down an obstacle, 4 penalties, just like regular show jumping. First disobedience, so that's a stop or run out, whatever, 4 penalties. Second disobedience, another stop, 4 penalties. And third disobedience in the whole test, for training level and below, is elimination. So the rules do change above training level as to how many disobediences you can have during the test, but we will just talk about training level and below. There are also time faults in this phase. So exceeding the time allowed is penalized by 0.4 penalties for each second or part of a second. But compared to show jumping, the time allowed is usually relatively attainable. In show jumping, we don't want you to have to go excessively fast in this phase. The horses are already tired. It's a kind of a triathlon, so we don't push that too much. So let's go back. Actually, no. So We have a horse trial, we talked about that, but in eventing we have other types of competitions that are also offered. So in New Brunswick and also the Maritimes, we don't have a lot of horse trials that are actually offered because we don't have a ton of competitors, not a huge population of people. They're quite expensive to run. You need a lot of land and you need to build all those jumps. So it is tricky to find a property that is willing to start up a horse trial. So we did have Bray Fair and horse trials, but Lori, the owner, has stepped back after years and years in the sport. We had Fauché International, but again with the pandemic, we have taken a break with that horse trial. And so right now in New Brunswick, we actually don't have a horse trial. However, Matthew Strait, you'll probably hear his name quite a bit because he has just started building a cross-country course on his property. Last year we offered a derby at that location, and this year in 2021 he hopes to offer a horse trial. So we are really excited to have a horse trial offered back in our province. So to be creative, and these are actually also listed in the eventing rule book, so they are recognized eventing competitions. We've been creative in New Brunswick and offered combined tests and other types of eventing competitions to keep our riders familiarized with the 3 phases of eventing, so that when they go outside of the province eventually and compete in a horse trial, even though they haven't done all 3 phases together necessarily, they're still ready to go. And we have been very successful with our riders out of province, so this method seems to work. So we're going to start with a combined test. A combined test consists of 2 distinct tests which a competitor rides with the same horse throughout in one day. So they're always on one day. So the test may include 2 of the following: dressage and jumping. So it's kind of like a horse trial, except there's no cross country. So it's more, there's a lot more facilities that could offer this type of competition because they do not need to have a cross-country course. So basically, a combined test is working on your dressage and your show jumping. So you'll have to find your cross-country experience elsewhere. Deanna Phelan did offer a combined test last year at Gary Hill, and I think we plan to offer a few more of those in 2021. And I would encourage you to try a combined test out before you do a horse trial and see how you like it. A competitor may enter the same horse in 2 consecutive levels, so you could do an entry level round, and then you could do a pre-training round. It's less strenuous on the horse than a full horse trial, so we allow that. And the score is calculated in the same way as a horse trial. You want a low score, a low number of penalty points. Next, there is a derby. So a derby involves an optional dressage test and a jumping test that may involve cross-country obstacles. So you can get your cross-country aspect of the sport from a derby. This past season, Matt Strait at Peekaboo Corner offered a few derbies and they were super successful. The jumping can be in an arena or on a short cross-country course. The same competitor must ride the horse throughout, and the rules for the derby are less specific. They are not really outlined in the Equestrian Canada rules, so they can be determined by the organizer. But how we've previously run a derby in New Brunswick is we will put some show jumping jumps out on the grass terrain, and you'll jump a few show jumping jumps during the same course. So you'll jump the show jumping jumps, and then directly from there you'll go out and jump a short cross-country course, and you'll come back and jump a few show jumping jumps again. So that's all on the same course. Kind of confusing, but they're really fun. And lastly, what is a schooling show? So I have a couple pictures from a schooling show, actually a schooling derby, I think it was, at Peekaboo Corner. And Stewart Sport Horses organized this derby, the schooling derby, and it was a Halloween derby, so you can see that people were dressed up with their horses, and it was great fun. So a schooling show or a schooling horse trial is unrecognized. So that means that Equestrian Canada is not regulating, or the national whatever is not regulating this show. It's more of a low-key environment for less experienced riders and horses to practice their skills, and for new officials in the sport to hone their expertise before attending a sanctioned show or horse trial. A schooling horse trial may be all 3 phases and should follow the official Equestrian Canada rules for eventing. But if you get a result at one of these schooling shows, it will not appear on your records or act as qualifications. So when we talked about wanting to do an FEI, you need a certain amount of scores at training level to move up to that level, and you cannot get a recognized score from a schooling horse trial. Accredited officials are also not allowed to judge these shows, so the officials you see will not be accredited judges. FEI level riders are actually not allowed to compete at local unrecognized schooling shows or any series that's not affiliated with a national federation. So they're really trying to say that these type of horse shows are for people who are very new to the sport and just kind of getting their feet wet before they spend money on memberships and entry fees and that kind of thing. Something to keep in mind. Unsanctioned events are not, as I said, subject to the FEI or national regulations, and their organizers and participants are not accountable for compliance within these regulations. So basically, there's no way of safeguarding the welfare of the horses and athletes in these events or protecting the integrity of the events. So basically, nobody is regulating any of this, and the organizers can kind of do whatever they want. In New Brunswick, we're pretty lucky that the folks organizing these events do generally know what they're doing, and they are quite safe. But if you're interested in being competitive in this sport, you would see a schooling horse trial as an entry point for you to then move forward and progress to going to a sanctioned horse show. Okay, so that's almost wrapping it up. So what do you do now? I'm sure you all want to try eventing and you're really excited about it, and maybe you're already planning to go to a derby. So what we should do first is make sure you have a certified coach that you're working with on a regular basis. If you don't have one, you're not sure where to look or who to talk to, reach out to me or Deanna Phelan or Janet Curry, who's the president of Horse Trials New Brunswick. There's so many people, and we would love to help you find a coach in your area that can help you meet your goals. We encourage certified coaches because they have passed through a series of tests and certification programs that ensure they're safe, and the Equestrian Canada recognizes that they know what they're doing, basically. You should also check over the eventing rulebook and get yourself familiarized with the necessary ins and outs, the gear, and more on each level. So I kind of just skimmed the surface on what's in that rulebook, but it's pretty interesting, and there's a lot to review for eventing. It is your job as a rider to know the rules before you go to the horse show. So if you have any questions about those rules, feel free to reach out. Next is to determine what your goals are as a rider. So do you want to compete and move up the levels? Do you want to go to an FEI event at some point? That is totally attainable through our programs here in New Brunswick. You can do that. I mean, provided the borders open back up, but that's a different story. So it's just a matter of getting with the right people, the right coach, the right horse, the right program and the right pathway to kind of lead you in that direction. And we can help you with that. If you're more interested in kind of riding at your leisure and you want to check out a few schooling shows and play around down at that level, that's totally fine too. We have lots of riders at that level in the province as well. And it's about finding a coach that wants to help you with those goals and a suitable horse for that level. Totally fine. We encourage new riders to eventing competitions. So don't feel if you've never done an event before and have no idea anything about it. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for new riders to the sport that we can get engaged and that we can help kind of pursue their goals and show them the ropes and how to get there. So it's a great time, it's a new year, to use this winter to build a training plan and a schedule to help you and your horse grow and set achievable goals for the next year. So if you don't have any goals and you don't have a plan to get there, you probably won't end up attaining those goals. So it's a good idea to sit down and say, okay, what do I want to do? How am I going to get there? Do I have everything I need between a horse, my gear, my coach, my travel to attain those goals? And then work all winter with your coach to build up your fitness and get ready so you're, in May or June when our first competitions start, that you can go out and be ready to go. Renew or look into memberships that you need to meet these goals. So as I said, any rider in New Brunswick that goes to a horse show or rides on their own should have a New Brunswick Equestrian Association membership for liability reasons and a bunch of other reasons. And you can check those memberships out online. To compete in a Horse Trials New Brunswick event, as I said, you need a Horse Trials New Brunswick membership, and you might also need a sport license as well. And if you have questions about those, again, feel free to reach out. Lastly, I didn't touch much on this one, but I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to chat about it. But you should check out, if you haven't already, the LTED or long-term equestrian development programs. So we offer these programs in New Brunswick that are designed to help riders, to help find basically a talent pool of riders that really want to progress in the sport and help them to do that by subsidizing costs and kind of putting them in a pathway with other riders that are interested in the same thing to kind of get them to meet their goals. And this is we offer different levels. This can be for new riders. You don't have to be competing at an FEI level, but you also can be, and we want to help get you there. So the programs from last year are currently posted, and you can get a feel for what we offered and check those programs out. We do modify the program slightly and try to improve upon it each season. So the new programs for 2021 are not listed yet, but you could kind of get your feet wet and see if this is something you might be interested in for 2021. And that's about it. So we're hoping that we will see you on the cross-country field this season. You could reach out to Deanna Phelan, the president of New Brunswick Equestrian Association, or Janet Curry, the president of Horse Trials New Brunswick, or myself. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about eventing or horse shows in New Brunswick. Thank you very much.